Welcome back to the latest issue in the Think Digital Partners video interview series. Today, we will meet with Tanium's Chief IT Architect, Oliver Cronk.
Thanks for having me on.
In preparation for this chat, I went onto the Tanium website and its focus is very much on unified endpoint management and security. I was wondering if you'd be able to unpack this a little bit for us, please.
So essentially it means not looking at the individual problems that organisations face when it comes to technology, but taking a unified approach, a platform approach, and fixing the kind of big complex problems in a unified way, bringing together teams and bringing together data in a way that's different to other approaches.
Okay, that's great. So can you tell me more about Tanium's activity both globally and within the UK? And do you focus on both the public and the private sector?
Yeah, no, definitely. So whilst we're a US founded company, we're headquartered in California in Silicon Valley. We're a global organisation now, 1,600 people. We've got significant customers. Our target customer, our main customer, is a large enterprise, typically in the banking or public sector space. And in terms of UK public sector, I can't talk about specifics, but we are in a couple of significant large central government customers. And then if you look to the US, what I can talk about is the fact that we are across all four of the five armed forces. And one of our biggest customers is the US Air Force, with over 1 million endpoints, 1 million machines under our management. So yeah, and then in terms of private sector, Barclays is a public referenceable customer I can talk about, but we were also in several other major banks, several other major insurers, other big brands. So whilst we're small, our customer base is brands that you most people would have recognised and heard of.
Thanks. You've recently produced a global research report on the topic of where we all stand 2 years on from GDPR. Your conclusions showed that despite organisations spending tens of millions on compliance, over 90% have fundamental IT weaknesses that leave them vulnerable and potentially non-compliant. So there's obviously a lot to discuss here, but let's start with why you guys felt the need to probe into these issues.
So our research into these areas isn't new. We've been doing gaps reports for the last 3 or 4 years. We started with the accountability gap, and then resilience gap, and now the visibility gap. And I think the reason we look at this stuff is, as I said earlier, really we're about solving the big complex problems and challenges. And in order to do that, we've gone out and done some research, make our approach data driven and customer centric. So we see a number of customer challenges that are born out of a few things, which the report obviously goes into more detail on. But one is the fact that teams aren't working off the same set of data or the same set of tools. And linked to that tooling point is lots of organisations have spent a lot of money, don't get me wrong, as you say, a lot of money on compliance, but often it's fixing little point pieces of the problem. Like someone will have put in something for GDPR, someone might have put something in for, if you're a big bank, for MiFID, and so on and so forth. And it ends up lots and lots of little different, bites at the problem. And then the other one is simply visibility. Most of the solutions out there rely on you to kind of set up and point to all the different computers that you've got. And that naturally leads to drift between when you set that system up and ultimately as you're running your business, particularly in times like today where it's a highly dynamic situation that most organisations are in, where computers are being taken home or laptops are being procured. The world of IT is no longer this sort of static office that perhaps it was perhaps 10, 15 years ago, where you could perhaps go around your office and say, right, here's all my IT equipment. It's far more fluid and dynamic, and therefore there's often a visibility gap because most of the solutions out there just don't see everything you actually have.
The report is called Mind the Gap and is in reference to major visibility gaps in the IT environment of most organisations today. Can you give us a little bit more detail about that, please, Oliver?
Yeah, so I touched on it just now, but essentially this is where there are now so many different types of computing. If you look, there's obviously on-premise, there's desktops, there's servers, but there's now virtualization platforms, there's containers. There's various different flavors of cloud. Most companies now will have multiple cloud vendors as well, so multi-cloud. And ultimately, you can't, if you look to a vendor solution, they will just give you generally their view of the world. which leaves a lot of gaps because you have to start looking between different systems to see your server estate, to see your desktops, your Macs. You might have to look at different tools for different platforms, and so this creates gaps. That's just one example. I mentioned some of the others around different teams seeing a different view of the world. So perhaps your patching team gets one set of information from one tool, and your security team is looking at a vulnerability report that's come from their tooling, and there's a gap in visibility because one is seeing perhaps X number of machines, and another is seeing Y, and there's a number of things the report talks about on this theme really, where essentially teams aren't able to see the same thing, or the different tools are giving them different answers, and ultimately in these gaps is where potentially there are some significant IT hygiene issues, things not being kept up to date, patched, etc. So that's why fundamentally visibility and knowing what you have is crucial. I mean, the old saying goes, doesn't it? You can't manage what you can't measure, and that we're very much believe you have to know what you have and then be able to take action on that information.
And how do you feel about what's going on now with the lack of visibility during lockdown?
Absolutely. I mean, it's obviously a difficult, challenging time for people, on an individual basis, but also for organisations who maybe have seen, their operations stop or ramp up massively, depending on where they fit in. But essentially, moving to a distributed workforce, or moving to a situation where people are now working from home where they perhaps weren't before, absolutely creates a visibility problem. We had a virtual customer conference yesterday. We were doing it in person, but one of the speakers was from a major fashion brand, and it was really interesting hearing him talk about the fact that they are having to ask their users to connect to VPN in order to give them visibility and security control over their machines, which of course people didn't want to do. And so one of the things we've been able to help our customers with is essentially remove the need for VPN to have systems management. The patching and the management and visibility doesn't have to go over VPN, and the VPN should really be reserved for that business critical traffic that it was really designed to do, particularly in a time now where that VPN's being overwhelmed. So yeah, that's certainly one of the things we've done. And interesting that fashion brand said we now have better visibility because we've been able to decouple our remote management from VPN. And so now they're able to see more assets, and they're able to keep things patched and up to date by going direct to the internet rather than relying on an over-congested VPN connection. So look, I'm not going to say we solve everything, because absolutely we don't, but crucially this VPN crunch point that a lot of organisations find themselves in, and also the increased demand for digital. So your back-end servers that are managing your e-commerce maybe perhaps were never designed for the situation we find ourselves in today, right? So we're able to also manage and monitor that back-end estate as well, and give you visibility over what's going on there. Why are things slowing down? Why are there crunch points? And make sure that's kind of kept secure. So yeah, customers, we're very customer-centric, very customer-focused, and we're very much looking at how we help our customers during this difficult time.
So what do you think will happen if companies don't do anything about this?
So I think this is a really interesting one, and I think it's one that's often not conveyed up to the board, up to the C-suite very well. Oftentimes, the technology risk team or technology teams will talk in bits and bytes. They'll talk in terms of number of patches or number of vulnerabilities. Statistics that don't really mean much to perhaps to the board. And I think fundamentally providing a picture of what does your technology hygiene or your IT hygiene look like? Because the reason that's as important is most cyber attacks actually happen from people leaving the sort of doors and windows open in their house, rather than people ninjaing in through the skylights, through the ceiling. And what I mean by that is basic patching, keeping up to date. That's where most of the attacks will come, because hackers will look for those common holes that they find across technology, and actually keeping a good status of IT hygiene is vital to make sure that you're not leaving those doors and windows unlocked. So, but then conveying that in a way to the board that makes sense to them is quite challenging. And so one of the things we do is essentially help our customers provide simple metrics, or a more of a simple message from what is quite a complex detailed topic, so that they can get buy-in and get the right focus on this challenge and get the right investment from their management chain.
Thanks, Oliver. And what would your message be to our audience about the gap?
So I think it's largely what I said earlier, actually. It's kind of, you can't manage what you can't measure. And then, of course, once you can measure it, you need to be able to take action and control, particularly in these times where things are very dynamic and challenging and changing. So I think my core message is there are other alternatives than perhaps the big vendors, the traditional approaches that have been taken to systems management. And our company was founded in 2007 with a mission to reimagine this problem, reimagine the architecture, and come up with a different approach to solving this, what is often a very complex challenge now, like I was saying, across cloud, across on-prem, different places, and with this increasing pressure to move faster. Digital transformation now is probably becoming the top priority for most organizations, right? And how do you do that in a way that's managed, safe, and controlled? Well, you need to start with a foundation of knowing what you have and how you manage that estate. So that's the core message, really, is if you're curious about other ways of solving these complex problems, let's have a conversation.
I think that message will certainly strike a chord with some of our viewers. Our final question for today is, what do you see as being the new normal when we finally make our way out of this current situation?
So I think it's obviously it's on everyone's minds, and in fact I've been doing a video series called Architect Tomorrow, where I've been bringing in peers from other organisations to talk about this very topic. And so we've recorded 3 episodes now, and we've covered everything from the different economic recovery models and so on and so forth. And I think it's obviously quite dangerous to make predictions, particularly when there's so much uncertainty. But I think there are a few themes that you can start seeing emerging that you're fairly safe to continue seeing. I mean, look at this event, the Think Digital event. It's doing far more, online and in-person events are clearly either postponed or switching to digital. So I think video and online has become even more accelerated, and I think that's certainly something we're going to see more of. And I think sadly that's going to mean also criminal activities are going to move more online as well. There's going to be far more cyber attacks in a world where there are less opportunities to do physical crime. So I think there are a few things there that we can certainly be reasonably sure of. What's of course is really uncertain is how long will we all be like this, and therefore how much will this sort of be embedded in people's sort of psyche and behaviours, and that's very much what I'm discussing with peers at Architect Tomorrow is what are the signals for that, and how do we help our organisations pivot and adapt in these sort of difficult times. But yeah, no, it's a balance really of kind of curiosity about the future, but also obviously being quite respectful and being human first when it comes to business. Respecting what's going on in people's lives now has just been made even more complicated, and finding the right balance I think is going to be key moving forwards.
And where can our readers go to find out more about Tanium, your research and your new video series? Sure. So
Tanium.com is our website, and so on there we've got our white papers, we've got information about who we are, our founders, and our story. In terms of the Architect Tomorrow series, that's on YouTube and also on LinkedIn. So the YouTube channel is Architect Tomorrow. So you can find things there. And if you want to connect with me, I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, they're more than welcome to do so.
Thanks for taking the time to speak to us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the end of the year at our conference Think Cybersecurity for Government.
No worries.
Thanks, Oliver. Take care.
Great stuff. Nice to speak to you.